A lucky thing, too, Mr. D grumbled, playing a card. Bad enough I'm confined to this miserable job, working with boys who don't even believe. He waved his hand and a goblet appeared on the table, as if the sunlight had bent momentarily and woven the air into a glass. The goblet filled itself with red wine. My jaw dropped, but Sharon hardly looked up. Mr. D, he warned, your restrictions. Mr. D looked at the wine in feigned surprise. Dear me, old habits. Sorry, more thunder. Mr. D waved his hand again and the wineglass changed into a fresh can of Diet Coke. He sighed unhappily, popped the top of the soda, and went back to his card game. Sharon winked at me. Mr. D offended his father a while back, took a fancy to a wood nymph who had been declared off limits. A wood nymph, I repeated, still staring at the Diet Coke can like it came from outer space. Yes, Mr. D confessed. Father loves to punish me. The first time, probation. Ghastly. Absolutely horrid. 10 years. The second time, well, she was pretty, and I couldn't stay away. The second time, he sent me here. Half-Blood Hill. Summer camp for brats like you. Be a better influence, he told me. Work with youths rather than tearing them down. Ha! Absolutely unfair. Mr. D sounded about 6 years old, like a pouting little kid. And I stammered, your father is de immortals. Sharon, Mr. D said, I thought you taught this boy the basics. My father is Zeus, of course. I ran through D names from Greek mythology. Wine, the skin of a tiger, the satires that all seemed to work here, the way Grover cringed as if Mr. D was his master. You're Dionysus, the god of wine. Mr. D rolled his eyes. What do they say these days, Grover? Do the children say, well, duh? Yes, Mr. D. Then, well, duh, Percy Jackson. Did you think I was Aphrodite, perhaps? You're a god? Yes, child. A god, you. He turned to look at me straight on, and I saw a kind of purplish fire in his eyes, a hint that this wimpy, plump little man was only showing me the tiniest bit of his true nature. I saw visions of grapevines choking unbelievers to death, drunken warriors insane with battle lust, sailors screaming as their hands turned to flippers, their face elongating into dolphin snouts. I knew that if I pushed him, Mr. D would show me worse things. He would plant a disease in my brain that would leave me wearing a straitjacket in a rubber room for the rest of my life. Would you like to test me, child? He said softly. No, sir. The fire died a little. He turned back to his card game. I believe I win. Not quite, Mr. D, Sharon said. He sat down straight, tallied the points, and said, the game goes to me. I thought Mr. D was going to vaporize Sharon right out of his wheelchair, but he just sighed through his nose as if he was that he was used to being beaten by the Latin teacher. He got up and Grover rose too. I'm tired, Mr. D said, and I believe I'll take a nap before the sing-along tonight. But first, Grover, we need to talk, again, about your less than perfect performance on this assignment. Grover's face was beaded with sweat. Yes, sir. Mr. D turned to me. Cabin 11, Percy Jackson, and mind your manners. He swept into the farmhouse, Grover following miserably. Will Grover be okay? I asked Sharon. Sharon nodded, though he looked a bit troubled. Oh, Dionysius isn't really bad. He just hates his job. He's been grounded, as you would say, and he can't stand waiting another century before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. Mount Olympus, I said? You're telling me there really is a place there? Well, now, there's Mount Olympus in Greece, and then there's the home of the gods, the convergence point of the power, which did indeed used to be on Mount Olympus. It's called Mount Olympus out of respect to the old ways, but the palace moves, Percy, just as the gods do. Do you mean the Greek gods are here, like in America? Well, certainly. The gods move with the heart of the West. The what? Come now, Percy. What you call Western civilization, do you think it's just an abstract concept? No, it's a living force, a collective consciousness that has burned bright for thousands of years. The gods are a part of that. You might even say that they are the source of it, or at least they are tied so tightly to it that they couldn't possibly fade, not unless all of Western civilization were obliterated. The fire started in Greece. Then, as you well know, as I hope you know since you passed my course, the heart of the fire moved to Rome, and so did the gods. Oh, different names perhaps, Jupiter for Zeus, Venus for Aphrodite, and so on, but the same forces, the same gods. And then they died. Died? No. Did the West die? The gods just simply moved. To Germany, to France, to Spain for a while. Wherever the flame was the brightest, the gods were there. They spent several centuries in England. All you need to do is look at the architecture. People do not forget the gods. Every place they've ruled for the past 3,000 years, you can see them in paintings and statues on the most important buildings. And yes, Percy, of course, they are now in your United States. Look at the symbol of the eagle of Zeus. Look at the statue of Prometheus in Rockefeller Center, the Greek facades of your government buildings in Washington. I defy you to find any American city where the Olympians are not prominently displayed in multiple places. Like it or not, and believe me, plenty of people weren't fond of Rome either, America is now the heart of the flame. It is the great power of the West. And so Olympus is here, and we are here. It was all too much. Especially the fact that I seemed to be included in Sharon's we, as if I were a part of some club. Who are you, Sharon? Who am I? Sharon smiled. He shifted his weight as if he were going to skid up out of the wheelchair, but I knew that was impossible. He was paralyzed from the waist down. Who are you, he mused. Well, that's the question we all want answered, isn't it? But for now, we should get you into a bunk in cabin 11. There will be new friends to meet and plenty of time for lessons tomorrow. Besides, there will be s'mores at the campfire tonight, and I simply adore chocolate. And then he did rise from his wheelchair, but there was something odd about the way he did it. His blanket fell away from his legs, but the legs didn't move. His waist kept getting longer, rising above his belt. At first, I thought he was wearing very long white velvet underwear, but as he kept rising out of the chair, taller than any man, I realized that the velvet underwear wasn't underwear. It was the front of an animal, muscle and sinew under coarse white fur. And the wheelchair wasn't a chair. It was some kind of container, an enormous box on wheels, and it must have been magic because there's no way he could have held all of him. A leg came out, long and knobby-kneed, with a huge polished hoof. Then another front leg, then hindquarters, and then the box was empty, nothing but a metal shell with a couple of fake human legs attached. I stared at the horse who had just sprung from the wheelchair, a huge white stallion. But where its neck could be was the upper body of my Latin teacher, smoothly grafted into the horse's trunk. What a relief, the centaur said. I've been cooped up in there so long, my fetlocks had fallen asleep. Now come on, Percy Jackson. Let's meet the other campers. Oh, good chapter. All right, guys. I'll see you next time. Until then, love you, miss you. Mwah.